My name is Jonathan Isaby and I'm the Chief Executive of the TaxPayers Alliance. Now you'll hear a lot about the deficit and the debt in the run-up to the general election, so let's take a moment to get to the bottom of what it all means for taxpayers. The year the coalition came to power, there was a budget deficit of £153 billion. That means the government was spending £153 billion a year more than it was raising in revenues. So, 5 years on, and despite a promise now to have eradicated this deficit, the current government is still by no measure living within the country's means. This year, they're still spending a whopping £91 billion that they don't have. So while this annual deficit may have been reduced by 40% over the last 5 years, not half, Prime Minister, we can do without your jiggery-pokery with the numbers, each year they've had to find money to plug the black hole. That's where the borrowing comes in. And just like when you or I borrow money, the government has to pay interest until they can pay back the debt. So every year the government runs a deficit, however large or small, it has to borrow money which gets added to the national debt. And that debt mountain which politicians are allowed to pile up over the last decade or so now stands at a truly staggering £1.4 trillion. And again, just like you or I, the government has to pay interest on the debt it has racked up. And this year the debt interest payments amount to nearly £50 billion, getting on for £1,000 for every man, woman and child in the UK. That's more than the entire defence budget, nearly half what we spend on education, just being spent servicing that debt. Or to put it another way, virtually every penny the government took from us in fuel, alcohol, tobacco and air passenger duties combined was effectively spent on debt interest payments. And of course, we mustn't forget that every pound borrowed is essentially a pound of taxation that's just being deferred for another year, stored up for the next generation of taxpayers. Now, it may be naive to expect honesty from politicians with an election round the corner, but taxpayers deserve better. Politicians on all sides need to acknowledge how serious a problem that debt poses for us, and indeed our children and grandchildren who'll be paying it off. And as they do work towards balancing the nation's books once again, they need to be honest about what spending the government can and can't afford, because if they don't, they're only going to keep making the same mistakes with the public finances, which will be seriously bad news for taxpayers.